Hello everyone, and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. April was a very slow reading month for me. I may even diagnose myself as having had a small reading slump or reading fatigue. The beginning of the month was okay, but after the first week, two very demanding deadlines took their toll. Just at that time, I started a buddy read with B.J. Minton, one of the earliest and most loyal friends of this channel. We read The Lies of Locke Lamora, the first book in the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. BJ reads a lot of mystery and historical fiction, among many other genres. I believe fantasy makes up for a modest portion of all he reads. We started this read on April 6, and thankfully BJ usually reads multiple books at the same time, so my slow tempo was no problem. He could always turn to another read while I tried to catch up with him. I finished the book on April 30. The fact that I spent 24 days with this book doesn't say anything about my enjoyment of it. It rarely does. I absolutely loved this first book in the Gentleman Bastard series. This was my first time buddy reading a book, and I enjoyed it very much. It is great fun to exchange experiences while reading it. It makes for an even more intense reading experience. Every time we had read a chunk, we would compare notes through email. It is funny to see how reading tastes can differ. We know that, of course, but now I got a more detailed insight into this, and it gave me a better understanding of my own preferences. BJ, for instance, didn't particularly like the rather explicit torture scenes and the casual way the author kills off minor and major characters. The detailed visualization of grueling scenes did not add to his reading pleasure, on the contrary. While to my own surprise, I found that I was quite okay with it. Up until now, I dreaded to start anything labelled as grimdark, and I believe The Lies of Locke Lamora qualifies as grimdark. I believe I'm up for it. Joe Abercrombie and Steve Erickson, here I come. At the end, the reader is left with some unsolved mysteries, like the story of Sabitha, who is only mentioned a couple of times and is supposed to be the love of Locke's life. But in this book she does not make an appearance. We also are not informed about how Chains, the man who educated the Gentleman Bastard, has died. I was very curious to read more about the founding people of the city, the builders of these strange glass bridges that create false light after sunset. On this subject of differing reading preferences, BJ mentioned that when the writing is good, he doesn't pay much attention to the logistics of words and sentence structure. But then he wrote, "I'm not a writer, just a reader," which made me realize something I had noticed long ago, namely that there are major differences between readers' and readers' writers or writers' readers. More so than the differences between one reader and another reader. Neither is better or worse than the other. They simply are different. Being a writer myself, the technical aspect of writing is something I cannot not see. It's an occupational deformity that I've grown to appreciate. Some time ago I translated English books into Dutch. I stopped doing that because I couldn't read English books anymore without translating every sentence inside my head, which is extremely tiresome. That kind of occupational deformity was not welcome, whereas my focus on the technical aspects of writing gives me an extra dimension without destroying my fun in reading. Unless the book is very badly written, of course. One of the things of being a writer-reader is that I have no specific preferences for any storyline. Many times I hear readers complain about not liking a certain part or aspect of the story or some of the characters. When it comes to the story and the composition, like using flashbacks, I tend to be in the writer's corner all the way, unless he or she really screws things up, of course. Of course, I like certain kinds of tropes and stories better than others, But when an author, for instance, kills off one of the more likable characters, or when she or he takes his time with providing the reader more background of the world or the development of a character, that is just fine with me. This makes me think of The Wheel of Time, where Robert Jordan really pushed the limit with this in books like The Path of Daggers and Crossroads of Twilight. Still, even when that happens, I'm not overly frustrated. Most of the time, when confronted with a writer's choice, I mainly wonder, where is she going with this? What has he got up his sleeves to kill off half his set of major characters? Back to the reading of The Lies of Locke Lamora. On April 8, I had read the prologue and the first chapter and was enjoying myself very much. I had the feeling that I had landed in Dickens' Oliver Twist. Switching between different times was no problem for me. Flashbacks are not BJ's favourite style for a book. He told me that once he went through a book by first reading all the flashback chapters and then the current day chapters. I always trust the writer in telling his story in the chosen sequence so that the reader gets the information in the intended order. The scenes may feel mixed up, but they are mixed up for good reason. The condensed and inventive language Scott Lynch masters is impressive. Like this sentence from the prologue. If the suggestion that the minuscule black turnip you call a heart is suddenly overflowing with generosity toward me, leaves me wanting to arm myself and put my back against a wall. Or this beautiful description of Jean. Jean grinned, showing 2 rows of crooked brawler's teeth in a face that looked as though someone had set it on an anvil and tried to pound it into a more pleasing shape. The only bit of critique I have is that pretty much all the characters use this elaborate and complex way of talking. They don't distinguish themselves very much in that respect. It also takes quite some time for the main character, Locke Lamora, to step out of his nondescriptness. Even at the end, I still wondered what kind of guy he really is. What's his drive and what are his dreams? The banter is nice, although at times it seemed a little bit obligatory. It's not as entertaining to me as what BJ called the natural quality of the banter in the Ryeria Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. Still, some of it is very funny. I have to pay extra because your ass and your brains switched places at birth? Or this cheeky banter between Locke and a lady of the night. Locke is angry with 2 assassins and he blurts out, "I'm going to cut their goddamned tongues out." Oh, tss. Please don't. Us girls have a use for those, at least. 2 other examples of Lynch's exquisite writing. Dark circles cupped his eyes, and his cheeks were the unhealthy sort of red that came out of a bottle. We instantly understand what kind of bottle is meant here, but you could read it like it came from a makeup bottle. The Kappa, which is the leader of gangs, gives Locke permission to court his daughter. This interferes with all of Locke's plans and with his other apparent love in his life. "Let's start wobbling, shall we?" said Locke's niece. When the story gets more grim, BJ started dreading reading further. He really doesn't like it when nice characters are killed off. After we had finished this buddy read, he confided that he had considered DNFing the book. At some point, the story changes into a revenge story, and for that, BJ rightly pointed out, you have to care about the main characters. He anticipated a lot of torture and death, which didn't really cheer him up, whereas I enjoyed the book better as I got further into it. The con at the start of the book is not the main story. It deepens and becomes more and more intriguing. Magic started playing an important part. And the Bonds Mage, which is the guy wielding the magic, is not one of the good guys. Lynch's world building is very good in my opinion. He merely hints at other parts of this world, as well as at the remarkable history of the city of Camor. By not showing, but merely hinting, I got the impression of a huge and largely unexplored world, waiting to be explored. Such a feeling of richness, like there are infinite possibilities for the story to continue in later books. And again, the writing and level of prose are amazingly good. When someone tries to persuade a lady into inviting him to an important meeting, she says, "Caparasa, you are plucking at strings of conscience that will yield no sound." So beautiful. Or this one. "Get serious about telling me where that money is, or I'll kick your ass so hard every piece of shit that falls out of it for the rest of your life will have my goddamned heel print on it." I clearly enjoyed this book more than BJ did. I found the story very good and entertaining, and the composition with the time jumps and such impressive. I loved the prose, which at times is beautiful, inventive, and very funny. The ending felt a little bit disappointing. It was a bit like BJ phrased it, Batman saves Gotham City. Even though the story wraps up very nicely, this somehow was not up to par with the rest of the book. BJ uses his own system of grading books with 7 categories, where F is the lowest and EX is the highest. His G, which I believe stands for good, is 3 points out of 7. I, on the other hand, gave The Lies of Locke Lamora 91 points out of 100, which compares to a very solid 4.5 stars. I love to continue on in this series. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.